whole life sentences will be extended to revenge killings of current or former police officers, plus prison and probation officers too. David Lammy has stated that murderers targeting officers because of their jobs will likely face the toughest of jail terms. Shortly we'll speak to Simon Spence, KC. But first, Brian Booth is Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. Afternoon to you, Brian.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Always good to see you. I mean, obviously, the Federation have campaigned for a long time about having, reflective sentencing for assaults on police. Naturally, it's been woeful in the past. Sometimes it still staggers us when we see a decision made or a decision not made. Often doesn't even get past the CPS on some occasions. Every copper knows a kick in the shins or being spat at is something they rarely even report because it can happen so regularly. But, of course, the real serious stuff, the killing of cops, that is, clearly in another territory here. What's your response and what's the Federation's response to what Mr. Lammy, the Justice Secretary, is apparently proposing here?
It's excellent news and long overdue. I think it covers a bit of a loophole because if you remember the sad death of Andrew Harper from Thames Valley Police, Harper's Law was brought in to look at those who kill police officers on duty and make sure they receive proper justice, which we believe is a whole life sentence. But we met with Dr. Kieran Mullen on Monday, and he highlighted actually an area in the law which is a bit of an anomaly where he's representing or been campaigning for the family of Lenny Scott, who was a prison officer. He was deliberately targeted by a prisoner after an incident in prison, and he was shot dead outside his gym last year.
Yes.
He left the prison service so many years before. So this is to try and get that loophole also of if officers or prison officers or those protectors of our society get targeted outside of their careers when they've left policing or the prison service. I think it's an absolutely excellent move forward.
Indeed. I've stood alongside you, Brian, when, at conferences and awards where the fallen have been remembered. The stories are always troubling. It never gets easy to hear those stories. Clearly, some officers are lost, due to accidents, but so many lose their lives just doing the job they were paid to do, walked out the door at 9 in the morning to go on shift and never came back. There are very few, if any, jobs anywhere where that is the daily risk you face.
Yeah, and if you sadly read the Roll of Honour Trust, they have a document that published wherever any officer that loses their life in their duty, it's published in that document, and you read through it and it goes on and on. It's horrendous, but they are recognised by the Police Federation.
Yeah, and this David Lammy proposal, I mean, when politicians propose something, you often wait about 18 years for something to happen. It's like turning an oil tanker around, trying to get things into action. But how hopeful are you that this is little more than just a kind of light suggestion?
It's really refreshing to see that this is getting cross-party support. As I mentioned, the Shadow Justice Minister, Dr. Kieran Mullen, he's behind this, so it's great to see that the Labour Party and the Conservatives are working together for such a great campaign. So I think if it does get cross-party support, I think we know it will be delivered.
We hope so. Brian, great to see you again. Thank you for your time. Brian Booth is the Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. Let's speak with Simon Spence, KC, criminal barrister with Red Lion Chambers. Afternoon to you, Simon.
Good afternoon.
A case such as this, or a story such as this, rather, where somebody suggests, look, there should be a very specific sentence based on the profession, in this case, police officers, and to prison and even probation officers as well, those that are in a very precarious place by definition of their job. Would there be any legal argument against this?
I don't think there will be on the extension that the government's talking about at the moment. I think the first point to make is that under the Sentencing Act of 2020, the imposition of a whole life order for the murder of a police officer or a prison officer whilst on duty is already enshrined in law, and that's the default position. The extension, as I understand it, is that if somebody has retired or left the police or the prison service, but is targeted because of the job they previously had, then the whole life order is going to be extended to that. It seems to me that's an entirely sensible extension of the use of a whole life order.
Yeah, and Brian, our previous guest, alluded to the prison officer that was murdered after he'd left the profession.
That's right. I think the slightly more tricky area is where, for example, somebody gets into a fight on a Friday or Saturday night and kills somebody who happens to be an off-duty prison officer or police officer, but they didn't know that.
Yeah.
Whether that should apply in those circumstances. My understanding is that is not what the government is proposing. And it seems to me what is being suggested, which I have to say is an extension to the sentencing bill that was introduced by the last government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this sentencing bill has been hanging around in Parliament for a very, very long time. And so I share Brian's view that it really needs to be enacted and brought into force as quickly as possible.
Well, in your profession, which sort of ties in, I mentioned the sort of the analogy of turning an oil tanker around. You know, we hear lots of policies mentioned every now and again. Some, you know, an MP appears on Question Time or something, and they come up with a bright idea. You think, well, that's a fantastic idea. It doesn't see the light of day for 2 decades. And you think, how long can it take to employ a bit of common sense? And of course, the world of law is absolutely drowning at the moment in cases and backlogs and shortages of court time, magistrates, Crown, you name it. I mean, it's like wherever you look in your labyrinthine world of the legal system, there seems to be a lot of problems at the moment.
Well, there are massive problems. And, you know, obviously we're all still wrestling with the government's proposals to limit very considerably jury trials in an effort to reduce the backlog. But I'm afraid the sense of urgency is just not there. Mr. Lammy said today that the courts bill isn't going to be introduced until the spring. He doesn't expect it to be passed, assuming it passes at all, through Parliament until the end of 2026. And so we face another 12 months of the backlog growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And the Leveson Review...
Sorry, do continue.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the Leveson Review was set up to report urgently about 18 months ago. And so we're talking about potentially 2.5 years before any changes are actually implemented. And
we kind of live in this very grim reality at the moment where people are waiting years for cases. You know, pencil in for 2030. I mean, imagine going to your initial hearing and discovering, yes, we're going to hear your case and it's going to go ahead and it'll be on, you know, July the 15th, 2030. I mean, 5 years from now. I mean, all sorts of things happen in that time. You know far better than I do. You know, people's memories wane. Their decision to give evidence can change as well. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. That's surely, Brian, unacceptable. Simon, I apologise. Unacceptable in the 21st century that people are waiting 5 years for justice.
Absolutely. And giving evidence for the Justice Select Committee yesterday, David Lammy said that he considered 2 years' wait was an acceptable period of time for rape cases.
Yeah.
I mean, that is simply, I'm afraid, not acceptable from any perspective. You know, if you're a complainant who is alleging that you've been raped, being told you've got to wait 2 years. If you're a defendant, and of course a lot of people charged with serious sexual offences are remanded in custody, the custody time limits envisage your trial taking place within 6 months.
Yeah.
And so if you're saying 2 years, that's 4 times the amount of time that Parliament says you should remain in custody unconvicted. And yet, I was looking at some statistics today. People may not realise, but the government sets caps on the number of days a year that the Crown Courts can sit. So today, for example, 75 courtrooms, which could be available, aren't sitting. That's 15% of the national total. Yesterday, it was 64. On Monday, it was 60. So that's 199 sitting days nationally in 3 days. And let's say an average rape case takes 5 days, which in my experience is about right, that's 40 cases that could have been tried in 3 days.
Yeah. And of course, rape is, for obvious reasons, a very specific area where, time is sort of the essence, not just emotionally and morally and all the rest of it, but in terms of evidence.
It is. It's in a special category, but any case where the delay is as long as it is, and of course the cases you were talking about going off to 2030 are the low priority cases. They're not particularly serious offences. The defendant's on bail. But nevertheless, the risk of people falling out of the system, losing interest, failing to engage, it's all there.
Of course it is. And Simon, what are the reasons? You mentioned, the sitting days and the amount of days where courts are just dark during that time. What's the reason for that? Is there a logistical reason? Is there something we don't know? Is there, does something special happen if you sit too often in a courtroom? Is there some old sort of medieval law?
No, it's a very simple answer. It's purely financial. But the cost of reopening those courts will be a fraction of the cost of the changes the government is talking about introducing. And that is something they could switch overnight and just say, we're lifting the cap. We'll have the courts sitting at maximum capacity. And that is what we as a profession have been urging, not just this government, but the previous government to do for the last 3-4 years.
Yeah. Is there, we've been talking also about the NHS today and simply the size of it. And there's sort of analogous moments, I guess, within how big systems are run. And a previous caller was citing the Netherlands, where they have greater outcomes of health and things seem to tick along slightly more efficiently with greater outcomes than this country. Is there a country when it comes to the world of law, Simon, that you and your colleagues look to and go, look what they're doing over there, look at Luxembourg or wherever, where they haven't got this problem? In Luxembourg, about 7 people live there, so maybe not the best example, but, areas of life where you look at different countries and think they actually have a really good system and this is the reason why. Is there any way you could point to that does it better and we should emulate?
I think that the problem is you can't really compare. Most of the European countries don't have the adversarial system, as it's called, where you have prosecution and defence, a presumption of innocence, and the prosecution have to prove someone's guilt. That is what we have had since the 13th century, and it's what has been exported, if you like, to the Empire and now the Commonwealth, and indeed to the United States and Canada. They have changed some of their systems, whether they're for the better or worse, I don't know. A few years ago, I went to an advocacy course in Florida, and I was talking to the lawyers there about their conviction rates, bearing in mind they have jury selection and all this sort of thing, which we don't. And our conviction rates, I think, were about 3% different. So I do wonder whether actually any of the changes that are being proposed are going to improve things. But alienating the general public from the criminal justice system by removing trial by jury, I think, is a massively retrograde step. And when the government says it's necessary to clear the backlog, just look at those statistics I've given you of 199 sitting days lost in 3 days.
We can't seem to speak to any lawyer, prosecutor, defender, whatever, who thinks this is a good idea. In fact, I don't think I've spoken to anybody within the world of law that thinks it's a good idea.
Well, I think there are some minor changes that could be made in relation to some of the very minor offences. But by and large, for sentences of up to 3 years, which are quite serious offences, to remove those from juries, I think is something that, as a profession, and I suspect the public at large, are united in their opposition to. And I think the government probably needs to start listening a bit harder.
That is always the mantra, isn't it? The government need to listen a little harder. Let's hope they do. Simon, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. We will speak again, I'm sure. Simon Spence, KC. He's a criminal barrister with Red Lion Chambers. And interesting, we weren't specifically talking about jury stuff there, but yet again, he just echoed what every single barrister and solicitor, lawyer we've spoken to over the last few weeks on the jury system about the idea of getting rid of it is an absolute horror show, as far as most people are concerned, in terms of the authenticity of our legal system.